So we were blessed to get together with one of our partners, Southern World, out of Australia and New Zealand. So we have a great group of people that are waiting for us live from New Zealand and Australia. Peter, thank you for the wine. We appreciate it. Has the wine been okay, gang? That was all donated by Peter and his team. Peter is stationed in Chicago. He's been grounded for quite a while as well. He wished he could have made it, but it just didn't work out. So he's put together a great spread for us here with his team. So Peter, I want to go ahead and give you the floor, and we thank you and all your team members for being a part of our small little Get Back to Travel event.
Okay, so you guys seem to be having just a little bit too much fun. So obviously you are enjoying the wine, and so please continue to enjoy it during the presentation. So good evening to you guys. It's good afternoon to David Evans from Visit Victoria in LA. And then we have Tim in New Zealand. Later on, you will have David Armour from Sydney, and Janine Duffy, who will be out in the wilds of Victoria in Australia. So without further ado, we will get moving on this, and I'll introduce you to the general manager of my company in New Zealand, Tim Reid, who is sitting just beside the Avon River in Christchurch, New Zealand. Welcome, Tim. Kia ora.
Kia ora all, and welcome to New Zealand. As you'll see in the background here, we're in opposite seasons to you. While you're enjoying your spring, having a nice glass of wine, we're going into fall in New Zealand, as you can see from the colours of the trees. But it's an incredibly beautiful time of the year. Just to make you all a little bit jealous, at a tourism conference here in New Zealand in Christchurch. Christchurch is on the east coast of the South Island, where we have around 750 people from the industry around New Zealand gathering to, a bit of a think tank session on reopening the borders for New Zealand to your parts of the world, which will hopefully come later this year. But there's more to come on that. But I'm here today to just really talk a little bit about New Zealand, but more in particular Christchurch. It's a special location, and as I'm here, I'll give you a bit of a rundown of the Christchurch city area, but also the region of Christchurch and how you kind of can work that into your plans for your clients. Christchurch, probably one of New Zealand's oldest cities. When the British came to New Zealand, in the 1800s particularly, they liked the South Island. It felt a lot like home. As you can see today, it's a little bit grey, which reminds them of home. They call it the most English city outside of England. And that's mainly because of the architecture around here. But Christchurch has gone through a massive transformation in the last 10 years in particular. They did suffer a fairly major earthquake a number of years ago, and that has meant that the city has gone through a major rebuild. And what that's brought to the plate for you as a traveller coming to New Zealand is that you're going to see this beautiful range of modern architecture mixed with the tradition of New Zealand. So you'll get a lot of the stone style buildings, a lot of statues of the founders of New Zealand who came down here in their tall ships and really made this a home away from home. The English, they brought their trees down there. They brought their gorse, if you know what gorse is, and they brought their animals, etc. So it's a really English feel. But with the redevelopment of the city, we've seen a big change and become a very vibrant, compact city. The population's only about 380,000 people, so very small. But the vibrancy of the city is huge. There's a massive food culture in this area because New Zealand's a bit of a food bowl for the world, with our biggest industry being agriculture. You probably all know of New Zealand lamb and a lot of the wool products you'll see, and for example, in Italian suits, it come from the merino sheep, which is grown here in the South Island in the mountains. So it's a really special place and a bit of a must do for an itinerary when you come down to New Zealand. Obviously, Auckland is the gateway to New Zealand, with most of the flights coming from North America going into Auckland. If you're combining with Australia, there's direct flights between all the major cities in New Zealand and the major cities in Australia. So you can get direct flights from Sydney, Melbourne, etc., directly into Christchurch if you've got clients only wanting to do the South Island. But a couple of things I'll go over about the city and what to do while the time here. You want 2 nights at least. It's become such a mecca for just the city, but not just the city, but also the region for exploring a good base. So 3 nights is, if you've got clients with a bit more time, 3 nights is great. It gives them the ability to have 1 day in the city and 1 day to get out in the region. Around the city, as I was talking about before, is a lot of the old traditional attractions around, like the old Christchurch trams, which are date back to the early days, which have been beautifully restored. So you can do, just day tramming around the city, stopping at all the attractions. There's dining options on the trams as well. Being very English city as well, on the Avon River, which runs through the city, you can go punting. So you've got your gentlemen or ladies with their little top hats. You can do a private punt or as part of a group up and down the river, and that goes through the botanical gardens. With the climate here, things do grow incredibly well. So the gardens are a very beautiful place to go and explore, with a number of restaurants, etc., along the Avon River. So a really good way to spend some time in the city along with the tram. Also, it's the gateway, as I was saying before, to a really diverse region. You've got about an hour and a half from Christchurch, you're getting into the Southern Alps, so up towards Arthur's Pathway. So for those who are a bit more active, a lot of hiking in the area. And also, for the ski season, if you've got clients come down here, especially families that come over the New Zealand winter, there's Mount Hutt up there, which is a great ski location as well. About 2 hours north of Christchurch, you've got the Kaikoura region, which is, if you've got clients with, or if you've got an interest in wildlife, it's a real mecca for some of the rarest dolphins in the world, which is the Hector's dolphin, which is the smallest dolphin. So really fascinating. So you can go and watch the dolphins or swim with the dolphins. There's also a thoroughfare between Australia and Antarctica for the whales. There's a deep trench off Kaikoura where the whales come. You get all the species of whales come. The percentage of seeing whales is really, really high. But they dive there to get their big feeds before they go down to Antarctica, where a lot of them give birth. So a really good place to get out there. There's seal colonies all along the coastline. And another one that's really special to this part of the world is the albatross. So you'll see a lot of the royal albatross flying around in that area. Another jewel in the crown for the region is the North Canterbury wine region. Kind of a cold climate, warm, so warm in the days, cold at night, which is ideal for varieties like Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, etc. So if you've got clients or yourself who've got an interest in wine, it's a great region to spend a day exploring there, and maybe spend some time in the city as well. And we can give some great recommendations for dining in the area, depending on what kind of food you prefer. Now, linking Christchurch to your itinerary for New Zealand, a lot of people do start in the Auckland region and work their way down through the North Island to the South Island. Really depends how much time you've got. You can do the ferry between the North and the South Island, connect with a train journey from Picton, top of the South Island, down to Christchurch. And you can connect through to a train through the West Coast as well. So if you're self-drive, you're wanting train journeys, you're wanting to make domestic flights in New Zealand, it's a really easy way to link everything together before moving on to other parts of the South Island. So you can either go over to the West Coast of the South Island, explore the glacier region, or head down through the Mount Cook region, where we get a lot of people who are quite active. But there's also a dark sky zone around Tekapo area. So if you've got people that are interested in stargazing, etc., great area before heading on to places like Queenstown, linking that all together. So just to kind of summarize what I've said, 2 nights in Christchurch is a must. It can't really be done in one. It's not doing it justice. We've got a good variety of boutique accommodation in the area, 4-star, 5-star hotels, and some beautiful lodges as well. We've got one for those of you who know the Virtuoso properties, we've got Otahuna Lodge here as well, which is a real jewel in the crown. And just as I'm doing this, people are biking past me. So a huge biking region, which is pretty much the entire New Zealand. So I'll just have a quick walk around. I'm probably running out of time, but you tell me if I'm running out of time. But I'll give you just a bit of a taste of what Christchurch is like. So a lot of the old statues around. You can see the beautiful colours this time of the year. We can just have a quick walk down to the Avon River and to see some of the local wildlife. But the Avon River is the heart of the city. This is actually the convention centre in the background where I'm actually at to the convention at the moment. But yeah, really beautiful. A lot of traditional bridges, great city to walk around, bike around, or catch the tram, as I said before. So yeah, well, that's me from Christchurch, New Zealand. So thank you very much for your time. And yeah, I'll hand it over to you guys. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Tim. Man, you know that's my home city. I grew up about 80 miles south of Christchurch, so I'm feeling just a couple homesick now. Great presentation. Thanks, buddy. I hope you can stick around for questions at the end.
Definitely.
Now, perfect. All right. See you, mate. I'd like to introduce you to Dave Evans, who is the Regional Manager of the Americas for Visit Victoria. Dave is based in LA. But he's got I'm sure, an amazing presentation for you about everything Victoria. So welcome, Dave.
All right, thanks, Pete. Yeah, so rather than, because I don't find my face truly inspiring, I've decided to use a presentation which I think you'll all appreciate. And in addition to that, the background, if I took this away, which is Melbourne currently, is an 8-year-old's bedroom. So we don't really need to see what type of shape that's in. So let's go to the presentation. I'll bring that up. Now, look, in a short amount of time, it's always challenging to really, hit every note of like what you want to talk about a destination like ours, because it's not just Melbourne. If you have any familiarity with, Melbourne itself, it's within the state of Victoria, which is, while it's the second smallest state in the country, there is still so much to see and do. And I think this is systemic as you go around Australia and you look at places of interest and where you may want to go on a trip, is you start to identify that, hold on, they've actually got wildlife as well. They've got food and wine, and that happens in nearly every single state. And so we go out individually as states and then collectively as Australia and spruik all of this. And for you guys as consumers, you're left to unpack, everything in terms of, all right, where do I actually need to go? I know I want to go to Sydney. I've heard a lot about Melbourne, but what's in Victoria? What's outside of the city? So I want to bring a little bit of that to light today. And ideally, what I'm going to try and do is leave you with 7 little takeaways in the short time that I've got of things to remember. And most importantly, you're already doing the best thing that you can do, and that's working with a travel advisor who are in turn working with companies like Southern World. That expert advice is how you get that trip delivered to be an unforgettable trip. So without it, having to actually go through and figure all this out yourself, it's not worth the time, it's not worth the money that it would take to actually do that. You should be working with advisors. They will deliver something exceptional. And so I want to show you a little bit more about our destination. So first and foremost, and currently that is not the case. And if you ask me when borders are going to open to Australia, unfortunately, I don't know. I could text the Prime Minister perhaps if I had his number, but he wouldn't answer me. We don't know. What we're doing at the moment is making sure as an industry that we are ready for visitors to come back. Australia collectively, like New Zealand, has done an amazing job in terms of protecting their people from infections and taking a very hardline approach to try and to mitigate that. So what it means in terms of reopening, we don't know yet. All we know is we're trying to support our industry and the people that deliver the experience to you going, and keep them positive about everything, so that when those borders are lifted and you guys are making that decision to come down and see New Zealand and Australia, that our industry and the experience is the same as what it was pre-COVID. So we like to say Melbourne's the gateway to Australia, and we do that because, again, pre-COVID, from LA, San Fran, Vancouver, you can get direct flights into Melbourne. We know you guys have an additional hop over. We know it's a long way to go, right? But I think it is important because only a few short years ago, it really was in and out of Sydney. And, now you've got these options. You can go into Brisbane, you can come out of Melbourne, you can do, Sydney in the middle of the trip. It just opens up the opportunities for you guys to take a clean slate to a trip to Australia and say, you know what, I think Melbourne would be a great place to start. Maybe Sydney is better served at the end of the trip when you want to do those big highlight experiences like climbing bridges and seeing the Opera House and getting out on the harbour, and that be your lasting impression of the country. So why not look at something a little bit different? Start in Melbourne. That may extend to going across to Tasmania. Or if you're combining New Zealand, you've got lots of options to hop across from Christchurch, where Tim was this morning, Queenstown, Wellington, and Auckland, and so on, all direct into Melbourne, which is a nice short flight. So if you are connecting both, those options are there to get you into Melbourne. And then from Melbourne to Tassie, Melbourne to Sydney, of course, Melbourne to Adelaide, and even across to Perth and so on, depending on where you're going, there's plenty of flights. It's Australia's second largest city. In fact, in the next 4 or 5 years, it's tipped to be the largest city. So what you'll see at the moment, and I'm sure some of these have been edited out of this picture at the top, but there's lots of cranes, lots of development. It's an amazing city that has a lot of rich history, rich being pretty accurate. In the 1800s, it was the richest city in the world, which was by virtue of the gold rush that happened at the time. That brought in a lot of people migrating to Melbourne and Victoria during that time, which predominantly was out in Ballarat region, just about 60, 70 minutes outside of Melbourne. But what that brought in was a lot of money. That's why you now see these beautiful mosaics through our laneways and arcades. It's why you see the inspiration on your plate with over 3,500 restaurants in the city serving cuisine from over 70 countries. That's all inspired by what makes Melbourne, Melbourne. It's very multicultural. It is born from people migrating to the place and then calling it home. So when I was last back, I spoke to a French chef. She'd lived in Melbourne for 2 years. And I said, so where are you from? She said, Melbourne. I said, well, you sound like you're from France or something. She's like, no, I've been here for 2 years and I'm from Melbourne. So people seem to assimilate this city. That's why it's one of the world's most livable cities. You see with the design of the city, similar to Christchurch, lots of parkland, lots of open space, lots of clean air, rooftop bars, those alfresco dining options throughout the city and in the suburbs surrounding. So it is a fascinating city. It's a great city for explorers. It's great for people who want to put on the sneakers, get out in the city, go through the laneways. You can see in that bottom left picture, street art is everywhere. And it is really an arts and culture, capital of Australia through the Centre for Moving Image, which has been redeveloped, the National Gallery of Victoria, which has, amazing artwork, both contemporary and the older style art, as well as Indigenous art too. Melbourne's one of the few cities that has very strong Indigenous touring options as well. So if you are looking to infuse a culture that is over 50,000 years old, one of the world's oldest living cultures, in fact, Melbourne, you can actually do that within the city, because a lot of people think you need to go further beyond to experience that type of thing, which is not true. Live music, if you love going to small speakeasies and jazz clubs or, pubs on the weekend, that type of thing, and seeing lots of live music, over 700 gigs per week. So again, this is a city that buzzes and hums 24/7. It's a sporting capital too. And if being Floridians, you may love your tennis. Well, the Australian Open, of course, is held in Melbourne. Over 20,000 tickets from America are sold to that event. We know that's a big driver for travel. Great time to be in Melbourne. Whenever there's a big festival and event, that's when the city is really buzzing. They bring in barges onto the Yarra River, all the bars, and everything is popping. People are out there, and it's, summer obviously as well. It's a great time to go. So I do encourage you, when you're looking at timing, to try and incorporate it around an event in Melbourne. Even if it's something you're not necessarily attending, you'll see the difference of that real buzz the city gets by being, perennial host of things like Australian Open, President's Cup Golf was there in 2019, Food and Wine Festival that they hold in March, the Formula One Grand Prix, and so on. There's many, many more too. So this is not taking a dig at Sydney either, so don't anybody get upset, particularly David Armour, who is in Sydney currently. What we like to say, because we're trying to differentiate people saying, well, Melbourne's probably similar to Sydney, we'll go to Sydney and so on. We're saying Sydney's a place to see, Melbourne's a place to do. We want you to remember that. We say that because you cannot replace Sydney. We do not have a big bridge like that. We do not have an opera house like that. We do not have a harbour like that. So for us to try and emulate that would be senseless. But what we like to say is this is a city and a place to do. So when you come to Melbourne, it is a place to do. It is a place to go and explore at night, find that laneway or arcade that has, an amazing little bar or a pizza shop or a cafe, and get a, world-class coffee from some of these places. Get some of the best croissants in the world. Loon Croissanterie in Melbourne was actually named world's best croissants. So there's all of these hidden treasures, and that's what I love about Melbourne. Around every corner, there's something new and something different. The most important thing for you guys to remember is that, yes, you can do it by yourself, but you're much better served by utilizing guides. So, Fiona from Hidden Secrets Tours runs these amazing tours within the laneways and arcades of Melbourne that you could walk through 3 or 4 times and not see half of the stuff or learn any of the fascinating history of these places without her and her team's expertise. And obviously that's something your advisor in Southern World could sort out. And that is the same when you step out of Melbourne, whether you're going to the Grampians or the Great Ocean Road, to know that you need to really, if you want to do it properly, get down, give some steps and experience it from the sand instead of from above. It's a much stronger experience in my mind. Getting up close and personal with nature and wildlife, and Janine Duffy, who I'll introduce shortly, will be the person to talk to about that. That's the way to see the animals, to see them in the wild if you can. Sorry, the next one. And our little penguins on Phillip Island as another example. It's something really special. North Americans really love it. There are products set up for you guys specifically to give you that up close and personal experience. This is, again, a destination where you want to go beyond the cellar door if you're going wine tasting. You want to meet the winemaker, or you want to meet the chef at lunch when you go to a restaurant and start to understand the people. We do get told we're pretty friendly for the most part, so that's a good thing. We want you guys to be able to experience that. So our guides all across the state and within the city do an excellent job of immersing you in the culture and what makes Melbourne authentically Australian. So number 3, toss out the playbook. So you may have been told this many times. I know, having worked at Tourism Australia, we've done it many times. But there's a classic perception of going to Australia, which is Sydney, because it's iconic, obviously, the Rock, Ayers Rock or Uluru in the centre of the country, and then going to the reef. That is the classic Sydney Rock and Reef perception of a trip to Australia. And while that is a great itinerary, it may not suit you. So what we're saying in terms of toss out the playbook is, a lot of destinations have come a long way in the past 10, 15 years. They offer a very vast array of experiences. So if it's nature and wildlife you want, or you don't like to dive or snorkel, then I would argue maybe the reef isn't necessarily for you. I remember going on trips and people would say, we're at the reef. I'm like, are you going snorkeling and diving? They'd say, no. I'm like, okay, so what are you doing here then? So we want to make sure through the experts you're working with and the advice that you're getting that the trip is set up for you. This is about you. It's a big trip. You're going a long way. You're going to be spending a good amount of money on these types of trips. We want it to be customized to you. So again, your advisor and Southern World, they will be the ones to be able to curate it to make sure that this first time you visit Australia, or if you're going back the second time, is exactly the experience that you're looking for, because there's plenty to be seen. So we want to filter that down into what are your priorities? What do you really want to see when you're in Australia? And part of that message is to slow down. So try to slow down. Sometimes you can get caught into saying, right, we'll do 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, and jump across to New Zealand and do 3, 3, 3, that type of thing. It feels like a business trip at times. Again, is there a way to maybe take something out that's not a priority and spend more time in a destination that makes sense to you? Maybe you want to, do something trendy, get out into a rental car or a van and drive somewhere like the Great Ocean Road, which, out of Melbourne, again, being one of the smaller states, 1 hour, 2 hours outside of Melbourne, you're getting into, the Great Ocean Road, you're getting Phillip Island, Mornington Peninsula, Yarra Valley, which is one of our premier wine growing regions. So all very close for a day trip. But if something like the Great Ocean Road truly appeals to you, again, these are the types of experiences. By staying overnight, you get so much more value from that. You don't get out of the car and spend 5 minutes at a waterfall and get told, hey, bundle back in, we're going to keep moving. You get time to embrace it. You get time to experience that destination, and that is what you're going to want to do. I mean, if you get out at Anglesea and see kangaroos all across the golf course, you're going to want to spend some time with that. Or the first time you see a koala up in the tree along the road, you're going to want to spend time. So again, doing it custom, doing it with companies that are looking at maximizing the time at these amazing experiences. And that's what these experts you're working with will do. It could be going to the Grampians. If you love outdoor adventure, you love to hike, It's a great place if you love Shiraz wine as well. Amazing food. So again, kind of like New Zealand, we have amazing produce, and we also have amazing inspired chef talent all across the state that bring that to life. So Vegemite and meat pies is not our cuisine. Our cuisine is really the people and the produce. So the produce is exceptional. It's known worldwide and used worldwide. We certainly keep some of that for you guys when you come down and visit. So it's all about, beautiful, fruits and vegetables and meats and that type of thing. That's what you're going to see on the plate. And it's the chefs and the people and the hospitality that bring our culinary experience to life. And that can be found everywhere. Yarra Valley for an inspired wine trip, just 90 minutes outside of Melbourne. But if you're taking a family, you've got Hillsville Sanctuary, you've got farm stays where you can go out and see a working farm in Australia. So again, great for kids, maybe not so much at the wineries, but some of them have playgrounds and so on. And again, your advisors, Southern World, can curate it so that you're going to the family-friendly ones. So that wine touring day that you really don't want to miss out because the kids are tagging along, don't worry, you don't have to toss it out. There's just ways to incorporate it and do it well. And this is a amazing wine growing region. It also has a lot of famous gin distilleries out there as well, hot air ballooning in the morning. So again, if you wanted to stay out there, it's best to do that if you're going to go ballooning because it's an early start. I've personally done that, and it's an amazing experience to get out over the valley. Mornington, similar. Fabulous wine growing region. The difference being it's a sea and vines proposition. This is where Victorians go to relax and vacation themselves. If you love golf, again, being Floridians, I expect that you do. This is where you find a lot of the famous sandbelt courses. So, world-class golfing down on the Mornington Peninsula, a great place for, hot springs at Peninsula Hot Springs. You can get out on the water and do stand-up paddleboarding and get out to these white sand beaches. So, again, 90 minutes outside of Melbourne. Can do it in a day trip, much better served by staying at somewhere like Jackalope. Spend a couple of days, don't just go to the winery and take that back to your room in Melbourne. Sit on the balcony and enjoy it. Get a cheese board and sit and watch the sunset over the valley. That's a much nicer experience. It's a way to embrace the environment you're in. And also in regional Victoria, that's where you really get to meet down-to-earth Aussies and that way of life that we all love and personally, miss at this point, having not been home for a couple of years. So, again, an amazing destination. Phillip Island for the little penguins, koala sanctuary as well, great family destination. And Gippsland, and I know Janine, who's pictured down there in the purple shirt as a guide, loves this region. It's quite an expansive region in Victoria. But, again, the last 10 years, a lot more infrastructure for tourism. She does a phenomenal job, and I won't take her thunder of what she does in these regions with conservation and her touring products, but a really stunning region. If you love wildlife, white sand beaches, wide open spaces, all the things that, through this pandemic, we're sort of seeking. I know I'd love to be out of my 8-year-old son's bedroom right now and experiencing something like that. These are the types of experiences that Victoria has to offer. So again, lots to unpack with the destination. It's why you need to work with the experts and flip that script. You're flying all the way from Florida. Don't make that first day be a city sites tour. Do something like going out regionally first, stay at Jackalope, check in, have a spa experience, maybe have a gentle winery lunch with a glass of wine, do some tasting in the afternoon. If you've got some energy, get on a bike ride, but then just sit on the balcony, embrace it, get that good night's sleep you need to refresh. That's a nice intro into Australia. So again, use your advisors to say, is this the best thing for me? Because they'll be able to curate that trip for you. And then finally, I said it earlier, but safety is our number one priority. As a destination, holistically as Australia, we've taken a lot of great care to protect our own people. And likewise, we're putting in place the protocols to protect you when you travel there. We've always been recognised as a safe place to go, and that will not change. And we look forward to welcoming each and every one of you when you're able to make it to Australia. We hope it is to Melbourne and Victoria. And also thank you for putting up with me today and listening to me. So we appreciate it. All right, so what I'm going to do really quickly is Janine is joining us. So let me just bring back up this thing here. If you happen to need the website and so on, you can certainly find it, but talk to your advisors. I'm going to introduce Janine Duffy. Okay, so Janine Duffy is the owner of Echidna Walkabout Tours. She is a charismatic conservationist. I can definitely attest to that. A koala field researcher, inspirational speaker, and passionate communicator of wild Australian mammals, birds, and reptiles. And again, I can attest that there is no better than Janine for that. She's certainly known for her big smile, her bubbly enthusiasm, and of course, her famous Aussie bush hat, which I hope you are wearing today. Otherwise, that makes me look like a goose. but I hope you are. And she's also obviously one of Australia's premier wildlife guides, a world award-winning tour operator via her company Echidna Walkabout, and an educator as well. So very busy, very inspirational person, and will take very good care of you if you come down to our region. So Janine, I think without any further ado, I'll let you take the reins and talk about your wonderful experiences in part of the world.
Thank you, mate. Thank you, Dave. And thanks everyone for being part of this. So firstly, I want to introduce you to where I am just here. And behind me, there's lots of little green boxes. You can see those. Those are trees that we planted last year in winter, our winter, so June to August. And I'm going to take you for a little bit of a walk through while I talk. And you can see just in the background, there's a lot of those little green boxes. We planted 3,700 trees on this property alone last year, even with COVID, even with just locals. And next year, we're really hoping that we can get some international guests to come and help us with this sort of a project. It's absolutely fabulous. But I better just introduce you and tell you some of the background to all of this. So I've been working with koalas for my whole adult life, which is a very wonderful thing to be able to say that you've done. I don't touch them, I don't cuddle them, but I look at them and I research them. And I have discovered a way of telling koalas apart while I was running a wildlife tour in 1998. It turns out they've got fingerprints, they've got unique markings on their noses. So inside the nose of a koala, there's a pattern of white, kind of pink, where the black doesn't go to. And every single koala has a completely unique one. And it meant that I could get to know individual koalas. And I've been so fortunate. I've been able to monitor one koala in particular for her entire life. She's 16 years old. And she is still living in those hills just behind me. You probably can't see because of the sun, but as I move around, you might be able to see. Her name's Pat, and she's the mother of koala Clancy. So it's been a fantastic time, and all of this is as a result of tourism. So the tour company that I own with my partner Roger, Echidna Walkabout Nature Tours, we're a social enterprise. And our way of contributing to the wildlife was doing research and sending researchers out to keep an eye on what the koalas were doing. Now, by about 2005, I knew that there was a problem. Our koala numbers were declining, and I didn't know why, because the forest wasn't burnt and nothing else was going on. They weren't cutting down the forest or anything like that, but koala numbers were declining at that time. And then in 2008, an important scientific paper came out explaining the reason why the koala numbers were declining right across Eastern Australia, and it's climate change. So basically the trees are dying, slowly one by one, but as each tree dies, there's less food for koalas, and it's getting too hot, it's getting too dry. And what koalas need is high moisture trees in really good locations where they're close to rivers. And so I started a foundation called Koala Clancy Foundation in 2015 to try and deal with this exact issue and get our locals involved as well as tourists in looking after and saving koalas. And everything was going really well. We were starting to plant a lot of trees, and then we got those awful fires at the end of 2019 and start of 2020. And, you know, it was really hard because I knew koalas were not in a good place anyway. You know, the trajectory for koalas was all downhill. And then the fires came and took out half of the koalas that we probably have in Australia. And in areas like East Gippsland, where we run a 4-day tour, it was just hammered by those fires. And I think, you know, I get quite emotional at this point, but I think something broke in us at that time. And it took a lot to work through that. But sometimes something has to break for something new to be created. You know, they say one door closes and another one opens, and I think that's very, very true for us. We've reset what we do as a tour operator. We are moving forward faster into the direction of conservation travel, getting guests involved more and more in tree planting, in removing invasive species, in monitoring wildlife populations, in helping out in the bushfire zones. And I feel really excited about it. And so even though COVID and the fires were absolutely awful, and I wouldn't have chosen them, I think it's made something really good come out of this. So I'm saying to people, when you can travel to the place where you can do the most good. And I need you. So this year, we're going to be planting 22,000 trees in this region for our koalas back there in the You Yangs. I can't imagine you'll be here in time to help us with that, because it starts in June and finishes in August. But next year, I want you. I need your hands. I need you for 2 to 3 days. Now, to give you some idea of what's involved, it is mind-blowingly gorgeous here in winter. So don't think, oh, it's going to be cold. Who cares? I mean, it's winter now. Look at this. I'm here in a shirt. The sun is shining. It's absolutely gorgeous. But even when it's cool, it doesn't matter. You know, you're working for the good of the planet. You come out to these beautiful private properties. This is a private farm owned by a couple of people who run a theatre, an independent theatre in Melbourne. They are so thrilled to have us here with our local volunteers, and in future with our international guests, to come out here to work with the farmer, have a chat with them, meet their dog, you know, have a walk through, look at the sheep and the kangaroos bouncing across the property, and then plant some trees for about half a day in company with locals. So there'll be locals here as well. And then spend the afternoon going for a koala walk in the nearby forest. So you get to see not just the tree planting, you know, you're planting for the future, but then you go and get to see the connection, you know, and see this is the tree that you just planted. Will be it in 100 years. I mean, can you imagine how that feels? And then even better, if you can come back 4 years later and you can see a koala in one of your trees. And that's all the time it takes, is 4 years. This is not a long-term project. This is an urgent project that will have immediate benefits for my koala babies up there. And so my my big challenge is that next year in winter, I'm going to need to get 30,000 trees in the ground around here. That's a lot of trees. And I need some people on weekdays because there's not enough weekends to do it. If you can get people down here for a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, come and do this with me, I will be absolutely wrapped. And I know Pete and Aidan will be really keen to help you do that with groups or with FITs, whatever works. Pete, is that enough?
Yeah, that was brilliant. But you're just one amazing lady. A question from the audience: what does each tree cost you? What does a tree cost for you to actually plant?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm so glad you asked that. It costs us $10 Australian to plant a tree. Now, that is to plant a tree that is going to survive for 100 years. So it's actually kind of cheap when you think about it. We don't just dump it in the ground and walk away. We prepare the site for it, and our success rate on these trees is 80 to 90%, which is extremely high for a tree planting project. So it's $10 that is extremely well spent.
All right. Hey, thanks very much, mate. I noticed we've only got about 5 minutes left of our presentation, so I better get up the coast to Dave Armour and get him moving. So, Janine, really appreciate that. Was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, guys. I'll see you soon.
Okay. Cheers, mate. Hey, Dave.
Yeah, g'day. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Last but not least, I would hope. It doesn't look terribly exciting behind me at the moment, but as nice as the weather was where Janine was and in Dave's daughter's bedroom, unfortunately, Sydney hasn't really put on the weather today. We've had about 3 weeks of beautiful sunshine, but it's decided to dump on us today. But I'm between showers at the moment, so I've got my umbrella with me, and we're just going to do a bit of a walk on the Sydney waterfront and show you around live down in Sydney Harbour. I'm here for a reason. I just want to show you the light rail, which you can see behind me. This is fairly new to Sydney, and of course, it's brilliant for tourists. It goes all the way up George Street, which is the main street in Sydney. You just tap on and tap off with your debit or your credit card, but it means that you can get around town a lot easier than what it has been in the past. And the locals love it, but it's also great for the international visitors coming here. Anyway, I'm going to pick up the umbrella, so excuse me here. I'm going to turn you around because, again, you don't want to look at me the whole time, and I'll show you some of our city. Okay. So as you can see, it's pretty damp. It's been raining the last couple of days, and we actually do need the rain. But the last 2 times I've done a presentation like this in Sydney, the weather has been absolutely unbelievable. What I'm hoping is that even on a bad day, Sydney looks good. I thought Dave's presentation was absolutely brilliant, talking about how you can compare a Sydney to a Melbourne, because quite often people think, I really only want to do one city as part of an Australian itinerary, but I'm from Melbourne originally, so I'm also a little bit biased towards that beautiful city, but they complement each other so well. And as Dave said, a lot of the things in Sydney revolve around the waterfront. And as you can see, it is very wet here at the moment. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning, so it's a lot of people are coming to work on a Thursday. You can see the ferries coming in over there. You can see the beautiful Sydney Opera House, one of the most recognisable buildings definitely in Australia and around the world. But it's just, it is a wonderful city, and most things do revolve around the harbour. So I suppose the big question here is, what do you do when you come to Sydney? How much time do you need? What are some of the activities you can enjoy? I would always recommend, I think, a minimum 3-night stay, but more likely 4 nights. As Dave said, you don't want to be rushing. You really want to spend some time walking around the city. It's a wonderful and easy walking city. But some of the things you can do, one of my favorite things, it's not for everybody, is bridge climb, which again, you can see right in the distance there. There's 3 climbs you can do right to the very top of that bridge to where you can see the flags at the moment. One is, I think they call it their ultimate climb, which actually goes the whole way across the bridge. It's about a 3.5 hour walk. You go on that very top. It's also disappearing behind a tree, which isn't helping. But you go to the very top of the bridge and then down the other side and then back again. The most wonderful views, of course, over the entire city. They do an express climb for people who don't have much time, which is about 2.5 hours. That just goes on this side of the bridge up to the top and then comes back down again. So it only does half of the bridge. And then the original bridge climb is 3.5 hours. And again, it really just does this side of the bridge. I'm going to try and get up the stairs so you can see it a little bit better there. But again, if you're walking around the harbour, it's everywhere. You can see the bridge from pretty much every angle. One of my most favourite things, and again, a lot of people don't do this, is do a tour or a performance at the Sydney Opera House. Quite often people will go to Sydney and they'll get the camera out and they'll take a shot like I am right now. And that's pretty much it. You've ticked the box and it's done. Whereas there's a 1-hour tour which takes you inside the Opera House. There's 5 theatres in there, and you normally visit 2 or 3 of those as part of that tour. It gives you a lot of the history on how it was built, how long it took to build, and a lot of the background on that. It's just a wonderful story. So I would always recommend that you visit the Opera House and do a tour or do a performance, and there are performances on most nights of the week, all year round, and experience it firsthand from that point of view. As you can see, the ferry's going in and out of here, but being on the water in Sydney, I think, is also a must do, and you can do it in many different ways. We've got a lot of operators we work with who can do private charters, or you can just do a scheduled cruise. You can see one of them over there at the moment. Or you can just take a ferry from Circular Quay, which is this area here on the waterfront. There's ferries leaving every 5 minutes and going to different parts within the inner harbour of Sydney. You can take a ferry to Manly and then walk along the promenade out to the outer beach there. Or you can just stay within the inner harbour and go over to Taronga Park Zoo, which is on the northern side, the other side of the harbour from where I'm standing at the moment. What else? There's seaplane flights you can do on the harbour from Rose Bay. They're either just scenic flights, or they can take you out to a location in the northern beaches or in the inner waterways for a nice luncheon on one day. There's kayaking excursions you can do on the harbour. A lot of people will actually spend one day going out of Sydney to what is an area called the Blue Mountains. It's about a 2-hour trip each way, but it's a full day excursion out to the Blue Mountains and what's called the Jamison Valley. The reason it's called the Blue Mountains is because of the eucalyptus tree that covers the entire valley and everywhere around, and because of the eucalypt on it, it shows as a blue sort of tint in the air around the area, but it's absolutely wonderful. Again, you can incorporate that in with a visit out to the Olympic Village on the way, or even a wildlife park. But as both Janine and David were saying, our preference is always that you see Australian wildlife in the wild instead of in a wildlife park. But sometimes people don't have that opportunity. So there are other options there. And as I said, just spending a little bit of time in around the city and enjoying it. Just to give you an idea of some of the hotels here, you can see the Four Seasons just up there, and just to the right of that is the Shangri-La. Around behind me is the overseas passenger terminal behind that tree. So that's where the cruise ships come in. So again, it's very close to everything going on in the city and very handy if you're wanting to have a look around town. As I said, I've always thought that Sydney is at least a 4-night stay. That gives you 3 full days. And again, if you're going out of the city to experience some of the regional parts, it gives you 2 days within the city centre itself and around Sydney to do some of the activities I've just talked about. That's a quick overview and life in my city. As I said, it's not the best of weather today, but at least it's behaving itself at the moment. An hour ago, it was absolutely bucketing down. So, Peter, does that give you a bit of an overview?
Yeah, that's great. Hey, a question that came in earlier, and maybe Tim can talk to this as well, is what the expectation is when travel does open up, and maybe you can talk to the fact that you know, in New Zealand, and I expect in some places in Australia, we've been having rock concerts with you know, 50,000 people attending. So yeah. You know, I think the expectation is that when the borders do open, is because of vaccinations and you know, the mediation that you've done down there, is that it will be basically almost back to normal, because that's sort of what's happening with the travel bubble between Australia and New Zealand right now.
Exactly. Well, as I said, you know, there was one case in Sydney yesterday, but which is being looked at the moment. But it is business as normal. We did have mandatory masks on public transport up until about a month or so ago, but that's been taken off. And if you look around town, you will see people still wearing masks, but that's their own choice, whereas the majority of people aren't. I actually went to a performance of Frozen last night, invited by Destination New South Wales, which was wonderful, and it was a full house. We had to wear masks in that, but apart from that, it was business as usual. So the only thing that people are encouraging to do is, you know, the 1.5 meters, you know, stay separated from each other, wash your hands, so hygiene, good hygiene, and that's about it at the moment. Other than that, life is pretty much back to normal here in Sydney and throughout Australia.
Yeah, and I mean, to add for Melbourne too, they're doing, yeah, sorry, Pete,
Oh,
but like
no, Dave,
Australian
go ahead.
Australian rules football, you know, they're having crowds of 50, 60,000 people attend over the Anzac Day games and so on. So in
Yeah.
terms of outdoor sports, that was back. And, you know, something that did hit the news was Australian Open was one of the first events in the world to bring back fans. So I think for, you know, Australia and New Zealand now, it's kind of like here, you know, it's a bit of get some vaccines sped up and so on. But yes, I would expect that if the borders are going to be open, that, you know, they'll be at a position where the experience of what you would normally get to see in Australia and New Zealand will emulate what you would have got beforehand. I don't see the countries opening up unless they're fully confident the public is safe, and that would mean capacity at, you know, events and, you know, all that type of thing. So
Perfect, perfectly answered. I know, I think our hour is coming to a close. So look, on behalf of David and David, or Dave and Dave, and Janine and Tim and myself, we really appreciate you attending this little live event from Australia and New Zealand. We hope you enjoyed your wine, and so on behalf of us all, we appreciate you learning a little bit more about Sydney, Melbourne, Echidna Walkabout, Christchurch and the environs, and Southern World. So thanks again, and we will sign out.